the motor program. Basically, how the motor actions are controlled by the nervous system is comes under this presentation. Our initial understanding about movement started with the reflex theory. So according to that reflex theory, a stimulus is needed to initiate the movement, and later the feedback also it's needed to correct the motor actions. So the earlier emphasis has been given for the stimulus as well as feedback. This is the earlier understanding of us about the movement. Later point of time, a lot of research has been done. One of the research is the de-efferentation studies. Here, the scientists, they have done the spinal cord, dorsal nerve root, they have cut so that the spinal cord is deprived of sensory feedback, sensory stimuli from the efferent organs and all. So when they are studying, like initially they found out on locust, even after cutting the spinal nerves, the animal is able to produce the rhythmical wing movement. That bird is able to do the rhythmical wing movement. It is resembling like a flying movement. Later, the same kind of experiment has been done on the cat. So here, when the spinal nerve roots are cut, even the cat is able to produce the locomotory actions. So based on this finding, they have understood that even without a stimulus, motor action can be executed in the living organism. This is the understanding from the studies they found out. So from the reflex theory, they have shifted to the other concept called motor program. If the stimulus is not there, if the feedback is not there, also if a living organism is able to produce a movement, means it should be programmed. The motor program should be there in order to initiate the motor action. This is the conclusion they have got it from the de-efferentation studies. So they have shifted their idea from the reflex theory to the motor program. So here, according to this motor program, this is a set of rule for a given action. So basically, it is an abstract representation of any action, and it has some set of rules within that, and it doesn't need the sensory information. This is the basic of motor program. So motor program, it is there in the central nervous system. This is having the abstract representation of any given actions. Some rules are there. That rules will be giving the command to the motor system to execute the function, even without the sensory information. So this is the initial understanding of the motor program. The same thing, the definition by the Keeley has been given here. A motor program is a sequence of stored commands that is structured before the movement begins and allows the entire sequence to be carried and influenced by the peripheral feedback. So we are understanding that stimulus is not needed to initiate the movement. Even feedback is not needed to correct the or altered the motor actions. So this is what motor program theory is saying. So initially, this when they are concluding this motor program, they thought that for each and every motor action, there is a representation in the motor program, like that they thought. So in that case, when you're seeing here, for example, like throwing a ball, overheaded actions, or from the sides, or little variation by bending your elbow, if you are doing also, there are a lot of variation in the same actions you can see. So like that, so many actions are there in the human being. In the day-to-day life, you can also enumerate. So many motor actions are there. So according to this theory, if motor program is existing for each and every movement, is there should be thousands of programs should be there. So if it is there, then where these informations are stored, that is one of the problem. So many motor programs cannot be exist. So even you can compare this storage problem in the library. When we are adding up of books, it is very difficult to arrange and find out whenever it is needed. So storage problem is one of the major problem for the existence of motor program for each and every actions. And it also have one more problem, that is the novelty problem. For example, when you are trying to do actions like newly, the first time when you are trying to do that, how the motor program is helping for that? It's a question. So it has not been explained by the motor program. Even novelty in terms of other things, like you consider hitting of a tennis ball. So when a player is doing these actions, somewhere around more than 50 times, 100 times, they'll be repeating. When you're watching this two consecutive or any two set of activities, no two activity or motor actions won't be similar. It won't produce the exact motor pattern. Slight variations will be there. So how this is also not explained by the motor program. So this motor program is not explaining where is the motor program is stored, and it is also not explaining how the new actions are carried out. Because of this, they found out, they have moved from the each and every movement is having the abstract form. From that concept, they have moved that to the generalized motor program. Here they are classifying set of movements, set of actions like a class of movement. So for example, when you are saying a class of movement, again the same example, like hitting a tennis ball. The player is playing, sometimes ball is coming from the right side, sometimes it is coming from the left side, sometimes player has to jump and hit, sometimes player has to move towards near the ball. So there are so many variations, but the basic action is the hitting the ball. So this comes under one class of movement. So motor program notion has been changed. There are generalized motor programs for a given class of movement, not for each and every movement. So for a given class of movement, some generalized motor program is existing. Then here we need to understand what is generalized motor program. Here it is consisting of movements within a class share the same sequencing, relative timing and relative forces. We will see all this one by one. To execute the motor program, some variable parameters should be given to the generalized motor program. Then only it will be activating. Then only it can execute on the motor system. So just to we will see one more time this little later. So here we are understanding that for a class of movement, there is a motor program. We can compare this with a computer model. So in a computer, when you want to see the mean value, how the computer is calculating, already some set of program has been fed to that. That is how to calculate the mean. So here the given problem is calculate the mean value for a set of numbers. So first you are giving one set of number. Later you want to identify the mean value for other set of numbers. So what you are going to do is you just feed the values computer has been already feeded with the program that if you need to find out the mean value, you just add up all the values, then divide the number of them. This is the given equation to the computer. So only the equation has been given to the computer. Whenever you are giving the values, different values, easily it can calculate and it can give the mean value. So we are comparing this computer model with the generalized motor program. So it's easier than the earlier existing motor program. So here we are going to see one example in order to understand the GMP, that is generalized motor program. I couldn't give the picture of that. Later you please refer this picture. Here set of people have been taken, and they have been instructed to write a word. So first time they told that write it from the right hand. Then instruction has been given to the write it from the left hand. Sometimes they need to write it with the mirror imaging also. Even some trial they were asking them to write it with the teeth also. So many variations have been given in this experiment. They made them to write the same word in a different situations. So when we are seeing this experiment, they found out some form of features of the handwriting is varied. Some features are not varied. So sometimes they found out that shakiness of the writing and time taken for each word, these are all, they found it varies from each position. Like sometimes from the right hand they are writing, sometimes from the left hand. So in this different situation, the shakiness they found it, even time variation also they found it. But certain features they found it is not at all varied in a different situations also. That is mainly the certain styles of the letter and the styles, like when they are asking them to write M or L, same kind of style they could produce. So they find out that it is not varied in a different situation. So some parameters like the spatial parameters, they are saying that it is not varied. So some part of the motor action can be varied, some cannot be varied. That's what we are understanding here at this point of time. So now when you are seeing one more example like this also, we can also try. Imagine that you are going to put a signature on the check. So how your hand position will be there, like your heel of your hand will be on the surface. It will be touching the table and you'll be writing. So when you're doing this, you can also see that your elbow and shoulder will be very stiff and you'll be writing. Same thing, you put your signature in a dry board, a kind of blackboard you can write. So they are comparing the check size and the board size. So approximately it is 10 times larger than that of the check. So now again you are putting your signature. Obviously you'll be writing in a little more size will be little different, like little bigger, you can say that. So when you're comparing this signature on the check and signature on the board, again same kind of findings you can see that. So certain parameters of your writing cannot be varied. Okay, so now we will see this variant and invariant features of a movement. So we were discussing about the generalized motor program. In that, we are trying to understand the features of variant and invariant characteristic of a movement. A motor program is thought to be responsible for the production of pattern of actions expressed in both the space and time. That is, when you are expecting that your motor program should give the command to the musculature so that the action is performed. So this action can be explained in terms of space and in terms of time. So spatial as well as time, like temporal parameters are there for a movement. So here some features can be varied, some cannot be varied at all. That's what earlier also we have seen. So this is explaining about variant and invariant feature of a movement. Here there also one, we will see, go back and see the generalized motor program. So movement within the class share the same sequencing, relative timing and relating force. To execute the motor program, certain variable parameters like absolute time, absolute force should be supplied to the program. In other words, we can say that to activate the motor program, some parameters has to be given to trigger the motor program activation. Some form of parameters has to be given to that. So I have given few examples of the parameters. So this is related with the terms called absolute time and absolute force. We will see little later, little more details about them. So to execute a motor program, you need some parameters like parameters. Examples of parameters goes like this. You are going to lift a heavy bag. It can be placed on the floor, or from the table you can try to take it, or you can try to take it from the moving vehicle also. So here we are trying to say that in terms of time, in terms of force production of the system, we are trying to give the parameters to initiate the execution of the motor program. Okay. So here we were seeing the invariant features. Now we are going to see the variant features of the motor actions. So these are all called absolute time and absolute force. So for a given motor action, so here lifting heavy bag. So here the absolute time in terms of lifting bag from moving vehicle, within a particular time you need to lift it. And you can also compare with hitting a ball, hitting a tennis ball. When ball is coming, within the particular time you need to hit that one. So that is the temporal parameters. Absolute time has been given here. Then absolute force. So here again we'll come back here and we are seeing lifting a heavy bag. So it determines how much force has to be given. So based on this parameters, we can activate the motor system. Most of the time it cannot be varied because already it has been fixed in a given point of time. So it's called it can be varied. I'm sorry. It can be varied at any given point of time. But you can consider that it's for a given set of actions. These are all the parameters. So we are trying to understand the word parameters here. So these parameters play important role in the execution of the motor program. It is initiating the motor program, and through that it also alter the output in terms of movements of the limbs, but movement may vary in only certain ways. Okay, now we are going to see the invariant characteristic of the motor program. So earlier we have seen the variant one, then parameter, and now we are seeing the invariant characteristic of motor program. if you are remembering, when we are talking about the handwriting, this particular style of a letter, it's the same. So the same kind of understanding comes here also. So for particular motor actions, some sequencing movements will be there, and time and force also determined earlier. So for example, again, in case of walking, like different gait cycles are there. So the sequencing of movements, relative time, for each and every step, we are taking a particular duration. And particular muscle force has to be given in order to execute the motor actions. These are all having the invariant characteristic of a motor program. So you cannot change this. Especially the motor program is working towards fixing the sequencing of movement. The same sequence has to be followed in each and every actions. So in other words, like which joint has to be activated. So the sequencing has to be maintained here. This is the main aim of the motor program. Okay, so the sequencing only has been expressed as order of events here. Order of events are invariant, but not the order of muscles. So we are trying to understand how the motor program is controlling the muscles also. So when we are trying to say that the same sequence has to be maintained, we can also understand in other way that the muscle, the order of muscle has to be activated like that, we can understand. It's not like that. Again, consider the example of hand writing through the right hand, through the teeth. So a set of program is there, but which muscle has to be activated, it is not given in the program. So motor program is not telling about the order of muscle work, but it is saying the sequence and pattern should be maintained, and it gives the command towards that one, mainly on the sequence and pattern. Okay. Now we are going to see relative timing. So relative timing, it comes under invariant characteristic of motor program. Already we have discussed this when we are considering the walking. The temporal structures of the sequence are invariant. That is, the four phases of gait cycle has been examined here. That is heel strike and mid stance to toe off to mid swing to heel strike. This four gait cycle has been considered. They have identified that like the following pattern, like when it is happening continuously, they identified that you please consider here the total gait cycle is somewhat around percentage wise we will calculate. So the gait cycle is 100%. Here this duration of each phases has been calculated in one point of time. Now they are asking them to walk little faster. Again, they are calculating the duration of each each phase. So already we have concluded that we will express as a percentage, the total gait cycle as a percentage. So they found out that this duration of each phase, when they are considering the total duration, it is not changed. It is, the ratio is still maintaining. So sometimes it may happen like a little quickly or little slowly, but the even the sequence also maintaining here, and same time the time taken for each phase is almost maintained or else multiplied. It cannot be changed. It can be multiplied. So here our idea is movement sequence remain the same, but timing can be changed. So this concept explain when we are varying our gate speed little faster or little slower also, movement sequence won't be changed and the time taken for each phase can vary, but accordingly in the ratio level only it varies, not totally. So the walking slow and fast have the same generalized motor program. Now relative times, okay, now relative force. So here relative force, the amount of force produced by the muscle remain in constant proportion from movement to movement. When you're considering two movements, it's a hypothetical idea. When you're considering movement 1 and 2, a particular muscle is working and give the peak force of 2 kg. Other one is giving 4 kg. The ratio is 1:2. Now we are changing the movement pattern. Here the muscle is producing 2.5, the other one is producing 5. So here when you are considering, again the ratio is maintaining. So why the ratio is maintaining here? Because it doesn't allow the sequence will be, the sequence won't be changing. So this is the main idea of the relative force. Relative time and relative force are there mainly to avoid the changes in the sequence. One more last concept about GMP. This is how GMP controls the impulses. This gives the answer how GMP is acting on the muscular level and how it produces the movement. Basically, impulse, it's a term coming from the physics. For the given point of time, a force as well as the duration of the force, when we are multiplying, it gives the impulse. That is it's related with the momentum and it's related with the movement of the object. So here in the human system, GMP, generalized motor program, is believed to control the impulse. So basically this motor neuron, when GMP is activated, it provides pulses of motor neuron activity to the relevant musculature. That means muscle is contracting and produces the force. So GMP is controlling the force production, and it also determines when the muscle has to be activated, when it has to be stopped. So the duration of the force as well as force production is mainly controlled by the GMP. So GMP is controlling the impulses. Pulse of neuronal activity will be given on the relevant musculature. So force production and duration of the forces are the resultant. So this impulses, when it is given, it causes burst of force spread out over the time to the appropriate muscles. So this explains the GMP is controlling the muscular level. It has been believed that group of impulses can be given at a particular point of time, at a particular movement action in a different time, so that pattern of activity can be produced. So the skilled movements has been given. So this impulses can be given to the different joints or else agonist, antagonist also. So a group of impulses can be modulated by the GMP, and so that it can produce the complex skilled movement. So this explains how the motor programs have a role on the movement pattern on humans. That's all. That's all. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. It was a very elaborate presentation on motor program. So now we will have a discussion about it. So anyone can ask a question about it, or if you don't understand what's the relevance of looking into it, you can also ask.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
It was a good presentation. At the same, I have certain doubts. I could not understand the how the sequence is not changed. Repeatedly, it has been said that sequence is not modified like that. Can I have some more clarity on that?
Yes, sir. So if you are considering a gate pattern, particular gate particular phases are maintained throughout our action. It cannot be changed. If it is changed, it cannot be a rhythmical one, and it won't follow the movement trajectory. It will be deviating, so that it has to be maintained in the same order to produce a rhythmical and smooth movement, as well as to maintain the trajectory in the same way throughout the action.
Okay. I understand this in the gate. But in other example, like two activities, it has been given action 1 and action 2. One produces different muscular force, and the next one is different muscular force. And in that also, it is given that sequence is not changed.
Yes, sir. So, in case like when force is changing, like two muscles, when we are considering two muscles are acting together, like shoulder and elbow. So in that case, if variation is happening, like for example, yes, this is basically explained when we are considering any movement, like for example, reaching movement one indicates that reaching with a normal posture, like sitting posture. The other one, movement two, maybe sitting with reaching with a little bit bending my trunk and reaching like that. So in this two orders, two movement pattern, if muscle force is changing, the muscle peak force developed by the shoulder muscles and the elbow muscles are changing too much, if the variation is there, the smoothness cannot be there, and it won't be it won't follow a same trajectory. But when you are changing the ratio of the muscle force, then it can be varied in speed, or mild variation can be allowed. At the same time, same kind of pattern can be maintained throughout the action.
Okay.
So basically, I'll just add.
Yeah.
I don't know, somehow echo is too much. 1 second. So can you mute your mic? Yeah. Okay. So basically, what they are telling us. 1 second, sir. Raji, can you also mute your mic?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So basically, what they are trying to tell us. So you can hear me, right?
Yes. Yes, Vasantan, yes.
Yeah. Right. So the brain has to produce a movement, right, sir? So the brain has to produce a movement, then it has to give information to the muscles, right? So if it has to give the information to the muscle, we saw that we don't have a separate program which is being given for each and every movement, right? So when we are not giving separate information to each and every movement, what we need to do is we need to have a general set of rules and we need to give that, okay? And then some variations can also be added to that. If that is not there, then each and every moment will have a separate motor program should be there, correct? So, Sendil sir?
Okay.
Right. So in order to tell that,
Yeah,
so they
I
are
understood
looking,
now.
so they are looking
Yes.
into what features seem to be there within the generalized motor program, and what features can be varied, right? So what they are telling is you
Okay.
can vary the muscle force which is being given, right? But what you cannot vary is
Yeah.
the relative
Mm.
timing. Okay, right. So if everything is varied, then you should have then it means that there is a separate program. So that's what certain features
Okay.
are varied and certain features are not varied.
Mm.
So that's what they are telling.
Yes, Susan. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, sir. Any other questions?
Yeah, actually, again, considering the clinical case example,
Yes.
this gait variability is one parameter assessed in generally in dementia conditions. They say that in terms of step time or step length, there must be variation. There is a what to say, accepted level of variation. It's about say 6 to 7% of gait cycle. There can be a variation in terms of spatial and temporal factors. So if that is exceeding, it is considered as there can be a degeneration in the brain. So something like dementia. So can we relate that into this, like that sequencing of movement is getting lost due to the breakage of circuitry in the brain?
So that is that I don't think we can explain it with there is a breakage in the motor program. Because when they told about the motor program, they haven't specified any specific regions in the brain which exactly is producing it. The one which we come closer to it is the CPG, which we will be seeing in some time. Okay, right? So of course, when there is a brain damage, there needs to be some changes which has to happen, and it has to affect the generalized motor program. But when you tell that variability is coming in, that is a very, very important point, and that's a very interesting point. But in the motor program concept, they are telling that the brain is controlling each and everything of it. Okay, right? So whether we need to understand it with generalized motor program or we need to wait with the other what to say, the other models in order to better understand this phenomena, what you're telling, I think we can just wait for the next thing, uncontrolled manifold hypothesis and the equilibrium point model, which better explains this.
Yeah, correct.
Raju, you can just stop sharing your screen. Yeah.
So
yeah, Vipin.
yeah. So actually, that the experiment done on the deafferent cat and locust.
Which experiment?
Locust and the cat, the spinal cord deafferentation, the sensory.
Yeah.
Like, sir, only that proprioception and other things which comes from the limb, that sensory thing, that only will be cut. So that other things like vision, hearing, and vestibular sensation, all those things will be intact now. So will that also will be contributing for that movements and all?
Yeah, that also will be contributing to the movement, but the vestibular system, I'm not sure how much they have done with, but they have blindfolded experiments also. So proprioception and blindfolding experiments they have done, and they found that there could be still they could be walking normally. Normally in the sense it's not exactly normal, but still they could be walking. Okay, and vestibular system may not be able to control the movement of individual joints. When you tell a vestibular system, it can totally control the speed of movement, how much acceleration we are giving, that may be controlled. But individual joints, if it has to control, either it has to be visual system as you tell, or it has to be proprioceptive system, right?
Okay, sir.
Right. So the basic idea is we are just moving from 1900s to 1950s, what they were thinking, and then to now at the current point of time. So in the 1900s, they were predominantly thinking in terms of the importance of sensory input, and without sensory input, nothing will happen. But in the 1950s, they started seeing that when they had cut the nerves also, it is possible that the movements are happening. So then they said that if the from periphery, if inputs are not going, then there should be something in the brain which should be creating it. And they said that it is a generalized motor program is there, and the generalized motor program seems to control the muscles by sending impulses, and exactly what is required, it tells it, right? And that's the whole concept, which I think we may need to take forward from here in order to come to a better understanding of the current concepts. Okay. Any other questions with regarding to motor program? Okay, if all of us are clear with the motor program concept, now we will see how the motor program is being executed. So in the initial days, people believed that the motor programs are executed by some hypothetical structures which are there, but later on they went on to prove that there are real structures which are there. So we will look into central pattern generators. Okay, Sarju?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you can Prasanna, 1 second. I'll give you the.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sir, can you see my screen?
Yeah, your screen is visible.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. So today I'll be explaining about the basic central pattern generator. So like moving on for definition, central pattern generator, it is defined as a biological neural circuit that produces rhythmic output in absence of rhythmic input. That is, it is defined as a connection of a neural, like it is defined as a neural circuit that when it is properly activated, then even without the external clues, it will be producing rhythmic sensory feedback, or like it will be producing a movement in a rhythmic manner. So in other words, it can be defined as a neural circuit that produces and repeats functional behavior like walking, eating, and swimming. So earlier there was a doubt like whether the CPG really exists in humans or not. Then like in order to like find whether there is the existence of CPG, there were various experiments conducted. So in earlier stage, there were like experiments from in earlier stage, Calency et al. Conducted an experiment where, like, in case of in a single person, they did that experiment. Like, the person was a chronic incomplete spinal cord injury in the cervical spine. So, in that person, by making the person lie in supine and the hip in extension, they found out that there were some involuntary rhythmic movements in the lower extremities. But then as this experiment was carried only in one person, so this was not enough to provide the evidence that yes, CPG does exist. So later on, Dmitry Jevic and his colleague, they conducted another experiment in order to find the existence of the CPG. So here what they did was in a subject with a complete spinal cord injury, they made the subject lie down in a long standing position. So in the lower lumbar segments, they kept the epidural electrical stimulation. They applied the epidural electrical stimulation. So when the epidural electrical stimulation was applied, there was some pattern-like locomotor activity in the lower segment. So based on this experiments, there was some evidence found that there is an involuntary locomotor pattern that can be generated in humans. But then this experiment, they could not exactly say like which are the neural circuits that are responsible for generation of these movements, that they could not be explained with these experiments. So like the CPGs, they are found to be distributed along the throughout the lower thoracic and the lumbar region of the spinal cord. So the CPGs, unlike the other neural circuit, they will be able to generate the movement even from a small autonomous neural network. So talking about the spinal control of CPGs, there are mainly three connections: the premotor neurons, motor neurons, and the interneurons. The connection between these three neurons will be executing the movement. So due to this interaction of these neurons, the movement will be produced. So like there are various models of CPGs as to how this movement will be produced. So firstly, we'll be talking about the half center model. So the half center model, what it exactly says is like the rhythmic motor activity that is generated, it is due to the reciprocal inhibition between the two pools of interneurons located on each side of the spinal cord. That is, like in this half center model, there will be two centers. One will be the flexor half center and the other one will be the extensor half center. So what they are saying is, in order to generate a movement, when the flexor half center will be activated, the extensor half center will be inhibited, and the vice versa. So only due to this interaction between these two flexor half and the extensor half, there will be movement production. So as you can see in this model, the pink part here is the flexor half center, and the purple part here is the extensor half center. So when an input comes to the flexor half center, so it will be sent through the interneurons, it will be sent to the extensor half center, and another input, it will be sent to the flexor muscles, due to which there will be flexor muscle will be activated. So this is one part, and like the signals that is sent from the interneurons to the extensor half center, that signal will stimulate the extensor muscles of the limb, thereby leading to the rhythmic movement. That is like walking, as we can see in case of walking. I'll be explaining it in later slides as well. So this is exactly like how the CPG model will function. So this is the cycle of the half center model. So what happens is, as I have said, so when the half center, this pink part will be stimulated, there will be activation of the flexor half center. So due to this, one part is that the signal will pass through the interneurons, leading to the activation of the extensor half, that is the purple part. So once this extensor half is stimulated, the other interneurons will send these impulses to the flexor half, thereby stimulating the flexor half signals. So when both the flexor half muscles and the extensor half muscles are stimulated, like when flexor half center is stimulated, it will stimulate the flexor muscles, and when this extensor half is stimulated, it will stimulate the extensor muscles. This completes one cycle of the CPG.
So after the activation of the flexor half center, this is the last process. One cycle will be completed, thereby leading to the generation of a rhythmic pattern. So once the rhythmic pattern is generated, the movement will be produced. That is like in case of here I'll be explaining in case of walking. So what happens is in case of CPG model, there will be, as I've said, flexor half center and extensor half center. So the flexor half center will be acting in case of the swing phase, and the extensor half center, it will be acting in case of the stance phase. So what happens is during the terminal stance phase, there will be maximum hip extension. So when there is maximum hip extension, the hip flexors, there will be stretch of all the hip flexor muscles. So once the hip flexor muscles are stretched, the muscle spindle of this hip flexor muscles will be stimulated. So when this muscle spindle will stimulate, this will lead to stimulation of stretch reflex of hip, thereby producing the hip flexion. So this is how the transition from stance to swing phase takes place. Similarly, so what happens in case of swing phase is that our feet, there will be special kind of pressure receptors on the feet. So when the leg goes into hip swing phase, that is hip flexion, the receptor on the feet will not be able to sense any kind of pressure. So when there will not be any kind of pressure, then the sensory input system will activate the extensor half center, thereby the leg goes into extension. That is the transition from the swing to the stance phase. So there are other complex models of CPGs apart from this half center model. So what the other model says is that as we can see in half center model, like individual center was responsible for one type of movement, but in case of more complex model, what they have said is that the same kind of rhythmic movement can different kind of rhythmic movement can be produced by the same small set of neurons. So this we can see in case of the stepping reflex and the scratching reflex. So here, so in case of this stepping reflex and scratching reflex, what happens, like this figure, it is mainly showing like the same set of neurons are present in both the figures. So like what it says is that due to the interaction of the flexor and the extensor neuronal units, there will be different response that will be produced based on the type of excitatory input or the inhibitory input. So what happens in case of this scratching reflex is that this F1 and F2 that you can see in this figure are the flexor neuronal unit, and the E1 is the extensor neuronal unit. So flexor neuronal unit will be like, it consists of two parts, F1 and F2. So what happens is when the limb is in backward position, the S down that S that is seen down, it determines the limb position. So what happens is when the this was actually done in a cat experiment, like when the limb is in backward position, so like there will be excitatory input that will be stimulated into the flexor neuronal unit, thereby producing the scratch reflex. So similarly, when the limb position is in forward direction, there will be input from the extensor neuronal half will be extensor neuronal unit will be producing the stepping reflex. So these two regimes are actually induced by different tonic descending excitation, which are shown by this arrows, like white arrows, and the inhibitory projection are shown by this black arrows. So modulation, Bhaskar will be taking.
We'll just stop here before proceeding. So any questions regarding central pattern generator? Now, what Sajju has spoken is about the core unit, how rhythmical pattern. When we walk, we see that the rhythmical pattern is coming, and so how this pattern is being produced has been told. If any questions are there or if any suggestions are there, you can just give it, and then we can go on to what happens from the supraspinal and also the sensory influences.
Sir, I think some time back it was discussed. Like other than these two primary movements of flexion extension. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So other than this primary movement of flexion extension, also some other movements are available like abduction, adduction, or the trunk stabilization while the limb is moving. So those aspects, how it has been it's been explained. I just wanted to know.
Yes. Yes. This in CPG model, when you're walking, both the limbs are coordinating, right? So predominantly they are focused only on this, but definitely, as you say, there will be other influences which are controlling all the other ones.
Okay.
Okay, right? What they have additionally told is there might be some CPGs for the upper limb also. So when the lower limbs are moving concomitantly, they might influence the upper limb also. So there might be a contrasting pattern. When a hand goes when the leg goes forward, the hand will be back, and when that. So some people have suggested that, because basically when you look into all the other animals in the animal kingdom, we see that they all walk in four limbs. So there has to be a coordination not only between the back limbs, but also with the four limbs, there should be a connection. So here they are predominantly explaining only about the core features of it. Of course, the other features, there would be other muscles which should definitely be activated.
Yes. Also, in the same limb, two action also can be presented at one point of time. Like for example, if we flex the hip and knee, we'll also do the extension of the ankle, like a dorsiflexion. So in one limb itself, we can produce that two movements, right?
Yes, sir. But predominantly what happens is whatever is the additional movement that comes in, that is also connected with this.
Yes. Yeah, got it.
Yeah. Any inputs to this? Okay, we'll just proceed ahead. We'll look into the supraspinal sensory influences. Bhaskar? Sajju, are you there? Sajju? Sir Selva, sir, are you able to hear my voice, sir?
Yes, Vasandan, we can hear.
Sorry,
okay. Yeah. Bhaskar, are you there? Can you just unmute your mic?
Hello. Hello, sir.
Yeah,
Can you
Sajju.
hear me?
Yeah, Sajju. Is Bhaskar presenting from a different system? Should I?
No, sir. From here.
Yeah, from there. Okay, fine. Then let it go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about modulation. So modulation is generally it means how the system will modulate the information, like in case of walking or going to walk fast or going to walk slowly and going to stop. So this is known as modulation, and this modulation are affected by this supraspinal influence and sensory influences. So in this diagram, you can clearly see that in the first there will be supraspinal, and it will be acting on the CPZ, and from CPZ there will be generation of rhythm and pattern, and that rhythm and pattern will be supplied by motor neurons, and this motor neurons will supply to the muscles, and this muscle will interact to the environment, and there will be feedback mechanism also. In this you can clearly see environment is showing feedback to the muscles, and again it is giving feedback to the motor neurons, and it is giving feedback to the CPZ, and it is giving feedback to the supraspinal system also. So upper one is considered as neuronal system, and lower one is known as mechanical system. So generally the activation of the CPZ is done by a mesencephalic locomotor region. It initiates the locomotion through the activation of lower brainstem reticulospinal neurons. So generally this MLR will be in a midbrain, and it will activate the lower brainstem, and in lower brainstem there will be reticulospinal neurons, and those reticulospinal neurons will be activated, and those signals generated from the MLR will be taken by medial longitudinal fasciculi and lateral vestibulospinal tract to the CPZs. This descending tract facilitates extensor and flexor motor neuron in CPZ and during rhythmic walking. Feed forward input from the reticulospinal neurons can be variable and unpredictable, affecting spinal CPZ. This feed forward mechanism is without having any feedback mechanism. There will be a without having any feedback mechanism, there will be some signal or information which will be sent to the reticulospinal tract to the CPZ. And after interacting with the environment, then again those signals will be sent back, and it will be sent back to the spino-reticular neurons to the brainstem and cerebellum area. And this spino-reticular tract generally it will stabilize and generate locomotor rhythms. In this picture, you can clearly see MLR is a region from where the motion is locomotion signal is activated. It will pass through pointine reticular formation, and it will go to the medullary reticular formation, and these are supplied down to the descending tracts, and it will go to the CPZ. And after some information is received from CPZ, it will again come back through the spino-reticular tract to the brain, and again that signal will be changed or modified according to this system only. Then how this brainstem affects. Brainstem is a site of convergence of several inputs, provides a locomotion related gate function, which involves the spino-reticular input from the CPZ together with other forms of input. So its brainstem is a center for convergence of the various input. Like there will be many signals generated in CPZ. Sometimes sensory feedback also give information to the CPZ, and those CPZ again give information back to the brainstem, and then brainstem interact with those signals, and again it will give feedback information. So this brainstem is a place where there all this conversion of signals and locomotion and all things will be generated in brain. Although the interaction of the supraspinal influence and CPZ is unclear, the 2 points seems to be generally agreed upon. Actual mechanism of supraspinal influence and CPZ is still unclear, and it's still yet to be decided, but 2 things are generally agreed upon. Supraspinal control of the spinal locomotors, CPZ, appears to similar in all cases of vertebrates, and CPZ interaction is far more complex than previously thought. Previously, ma'am also told there was many experiment like in the cat, locust, or any vertebrates like dog. That CPZ appears to be similar only. There is no that much different So it's all the CPGs which are present in the vertebrates are similar only. And second point is interaction is complex. It's not easy to understand, and it involves a various system and the various coordination system with that system. Generally, supraspinal areas affect these 5 locomotor areas, activating the spinal locomotor CPGs, controlling the intensity of CPG operation, maintaining the equilibrium during locomotion, adapting the limb movement to the external condition, and coordinating the locomotion with the motor acts. In upper case, like it's supraspinal segment will affect, but in there is effect from sensory influence also. Like CPG can create motion on its own, but that motion is not good, like it's not refined. So to refine those movements, the sensory influence can has various effects. So by having sensory inputs, the CPG can refine the motion, and it can produce accurate motions with the help of sensory influences. Result of the studies involving the deacceleration, nervous system isolation, and paralysis support the notation that nervous system is capable of generating rhythmic motor output in the absence of peripheral feedback. So this slide clearly says that sensory influences are not so important. Although the sensory feedback is not an integral part of CPG, still it is important for the overall motor control system. Sensory feedback is critical in modifying the CPG generated motor program to facilitate a constant adaptation to the environment. So this CPG generally helps to navigate through the environment also. So navigate through the environment also, like if there is a difficult terrain or difficult surfaces are there, then CPG will then sensory input will send the information to the CPG, and CPG will modify motor pattern according to that. So this sensory inputs helps to refine the action of CPG. And Pearson identified the 3 potential role of afferent feedback in production of the rhythmic movements: reinforcing CPG activities, timing function, facilitating the phase and transition in rhythmic movement. So this Pearson defined the 3 important roles for afferent feedback in the CPGs. Reinforcing CPG, like I have already told you before, that CPG is generated in its own, but by action of this feedback, the CPG can be refined, and the action like in limb action like load bearing, and then other action can be forced, or it can be done very accurately, and it will reinforce the activities which is already done. And timing function. In timing function, what happens is there will be various movement like change in position, direction of movement, and force, and that force will be changed according to the motor output. So what it tries to tell is there is various change in direction of movement and force, and according to that there should be change in motor output. So in exact time, in exact same time it will change those motor output, and it will change according to that. And facilitating the phase transition in rhythmic movement. So it's another action of this afferent is like there is 2 cycle as I explained earlier, flexor and extensor. So while changing from flexor to extensor and from extensor to flexor, in that time also this sensory information acts, and it will help to change in this pattern of flexion to extensor. Then this vision part will be done by Sergio again.
So now after the modulation of the stimulus, after modulation of the signals, Now we'll be seeing what is the role of the vision in order to generate the movement by the CPG. So vision actually, like in case of vision, they actually talk about here about the posterior parietal cortex. So like the main function of the vision is to detect and define the characteristic of the object. That is like whatever the object is there or the obstacle is there. So what is the size and the shape of the object, whether it is moving or whether it is stable, this all will be defined by the vision. Then it also aids in determining the self motion of the object. Then it also helps to control the foot placement, and it provides the visual expropriation, that is like visual input with respect to the external environment. So what they do is like earlier, like the posterior parietal cortex, it was thought like it was mainly thought that in the motor planning, the posterior parietal cortex would be helping. But then like recently they have identified the role of the posterior parietal cortex even during the motor planning stage and the gait modification during locomotion. So what the posterior parietal cortex does is that whenever the body is moving, whenever it sees any obstacle in its way, so with respect to that obstacle and with respect regarding to the time of the contact of our body with respect to that obstacle, and in order to avoid that obstacle and continue with the walking, so this all integration is done by the posterior parietal cortex. So what happens when we see an object in our path? So the vision, it helps us to identify the properties of the object. So properties being the size of the object, the shape and the location of the object, as well as when the object is in moving, then object, then to identify the speed of the object, and like how much gap is it required for the how much gap is present between the object and our leg. This all will be analyzed by the vision. So like based on this analysis, they will be like stepping over the obstacle or avoiding of that obstacle. So in order to perform the stepping over the obstacle or avoiding the obstacle, we have to adjust the gait. So in order to adjust the gait, there will be certain necessary maneuver that will be performed. So like the gait modification will be taking place in appropriate time. But in case of quadruped animals, like they have done experiment in cat, so all the forelimb has to coordinate together in order to step over the obstacle without hitting that obstacle. So what they did was an experiment was conducted on a cat. So like in order to identify the behavioral planning process that is involved in stepping over the obstacle. So what are the steps involved was, firstly was the object attributes and motion, then advanced paw placement, step over obstacle, storage of obstacle properties, forelimb hindlimb coordination, and hindlimb coordination. So these all were like obstacles attribute was like would be defining the object velocity. So in order to determine the like placement of the of the paw in front of the obstacle and like move the limb forward the obstacle, so like the move the limb in front of the obstacle, a special relationship of obstacle with that of the limb was obtained. So due to this relationship only, the cat was successfully able to move the limb forward without like without with by stepping over the obstacle in absence of the vision. That is like in case of when the object is in front of the cat, then the vision input was with the vision input it was able to like plan the exact foot placement. But then when the object was in between the forelimb and the hind limb, so due to the special relationship between the obstacle and the position of the limb, the cat was able to perform the hind limb coordination and move forward by stepping over the obstacle. So this experiment was actually like defined through an obstacle avoidance model. So this is the obstacle avoidance model, where like the basis of this obstacle avoidance model is the temporal spatial integration. So the temporal, in case of the temporal spatial integration, what happens is like the self motion estimation, the time to time contact, along with the limb state estimation, these all are combined. That is like in this case, the self motion estimation and the time to contact, this is these are the temporal variables. So this combines with the limb state estimation, that is the spatial aspect of this model. So this combines in order to give in order to form the integration on the basis of motor planning. So based on this coordinations, the motor planning is formed. So what are the like the signals that the signals from the temporal spatial integration, they will give input uh, regarding the gap closer, that is like how much gap there should be between the position of the limb and to that of the obstacle, and how the limb should be positioned, how the task is to be carried out. The details based on this is given by this model. So based on this model only, the motor execution and the stepping over the obstacle will be triggered. So that's it, sir.
Okay, fine. It has elaborately explained about what's the role of supraspinal center, and how does the other input apart from the sensory input from the feet also integrates into it. Okay, thank you, Seju, for the presentation. Any questions until this point of time? Yeah. Seju, you can stop sharing the screen.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Any questions? Any inputs?
Hello.
Yes, sir.
From all these points, can we understand like this in absence of the supraspinal inputs and the sensory feedback? It will be just a pattern generation and it is not used for any functional activity.
Yes, we might conclude that, but what they are telling is there is a limited, of course, from the supraspinal centers, we need to get an input, but from the periphery, they seem to tell that it reinforces the action rather than just being very important. In the initial period, they told that it was the most important. Without sensory inputs, we cannot do that. But then they have told even without that it can function. It might add or reinforce it. That's what they are telling. So so the emphasis on the stimulus has been reducing from the prior model. So we cannot just completely take it that without these inputs it will not be functional.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll just summarize it. The core points which we have to take in from this is number one, motor program seems to give inputs to the muscles, which are very specific, which seems to control certain features of the movement. And that is point number one. And point number two is the motor programs can be easily executed by the neural structures if they are connected in a proper way. So it can just tell start and then it can start and it can give the movements. But in either conditions, the brain is going to specify what movement has to be produced, how much it has to be produced, when it has to be produced. So all these details are to be fed into the system in order to produce a successful gait pattern or any other movements. Okay, so this is what we have been learning, and the next aspect of the understanding about the motor program as well as the CPG is we had a lot of physiotherapy treatment techniques which have been coming from that. The major treatment technique which has come from that is the partial weight bearing treadmill training, which has been given, which during the past 20 years, it had a great time for it. So primarily the partial weight bearing treadmill training works on the principle that, okay, CPG is there and we are activating the CPG. Right. So when we are making them walk on the treadmill, the inputs are being given from the periphery to the center, to the central pattern generator, and the walking is facilitated and walking training has been given. That's one. The second one is if you are going to input in Google Scholar or in any PubMed database about generalized motor program, many physiotherapists have been trying to find out what are the variant features, what are the invariant features, and they were trying to for relearning of it, they were trying to find inputs or feedback which can be given in order to activate the motor program and make the motor program learn, new motor programs to be learned, what inputs we need to give. So quite a number of studies during the past 40 years or so have relied on the concept of generalized motor program, and when we are trying to teach a person a new skill, we always think that we are trying to create an engram or a motor program in the brain. So both these ideas have had a huge impact on the physiotherapy profession, and many treatment techniques have come out of it. All right. So, so what we will be seeing on Sunday is what are the drawbacks of this model, why this model might be not the best thing, right? And what is the alternate model? Of course, I'll not be explaining about the whole details of it. Of course, Anatole Feldman is a founder of the new concept. So we will try to see a glimpse of it, okay, if not the full aspects of it. Okay. Yeah. So thank you all for joining. So any inputs or any questions I would like to hear?
Yeah, I think we'll learn the new model, I think.
Yes, it's not going to entirely change our practice, right?
Yeah,
because
still,
you have also asked a specific question, and the finding is close to that model rather than the generalized motor program. But a deeper understanding of it, we think might lead to a novel treatment in the next 30-40 years, of which if we are there, we will be able to come out with some newer treatments. Right. So that's the hope. Naveen sir, Rajna ma'am, Subbu sir, Vipinnath sir. Yeah, any inputs, any thoughts?
So as of now, nothing, sir.
Okay, yeah, fine. So we'll just go forward. And others, Devanshim, any inputs?
Sir, I just had one doubt, but I think it might be covered in the next session. Like we say about CPGs, but no one has told something about the fatigability of even CPG, like how long it can continue.
You mean how long it can continue, right?
Yeah, because if we are saying, if in a way, if it is considered non-functional, it's like even if the stimulus is not given once it is executed, how will it repeat again and again, and how long can it be kept repeating again? Because if I compare it with some clinical cases, then we get to see a different scenario. That's it.
Can you just tell me about what is that different scenario you get?
So supposedly, if we consider DF like no having sensory feedback from a feet, like in the case of a sensory ataxia, if one example. Yeah. So how long will they keep walking? And if with each step also there will be a variability in the invariant stuff also, like in the timing, the force, for the sequencing also in some parts. So then how are these taken in care of how are these taken care in terms of CPG? So ideally, if it should activate the CPG, the movement should be a constant one, like not showing such variability each time. So that was just one doubt, but then I think it might be covered in the next part.
No, okay, we will see that, but might not actually be covered in the next thing. But yeah, because even Salva sir had told that, do we assume that there is a problem in this program and things like that?
Yeah.
I will just look into that. Maybe.
All right.
Any other inputs?
Can I add one point here?
Yeah, please.
This is the previous question she was asking, like how long the central pattern generator can be activated. I'm not sure whether it is the correct answer for that or not. When I was reading about the General Motor program, in one of the article it says that when it is activated, it can go up to 400 milliseconds. Like basic time is 200 millisecond, but it can go about without any interruption for another 400 milliseconds, like that they were saying. So each program can activated this many seconds. So I'm not sure whether this is related with CPG.
Yeah, because when we tell about the stepping, it is in seconds, right? So it's not in milliseconds.
No. In each program can be activated, like can give the response up to that time.
Okay. That's what, if it can give only up to that time, then how are we working for a minute?
Okay.
So maybe it's about the motor program rather than the CPG activation, right?
Yeah, this is about the motor program.
Motor program, right? So once it's activated. Vipin sir, any inputs?
Yes, sir. I feel that it mainly depends upon the fatigability of the muscles.
Sir, one second. Yes, sir.
I feel it's about the fatigability of the muscles. So after a certain time, like once the muscles are getting fatigued, maybe like the nervous system, like in case if it gets any feedback, or like it might slow down or might stop.
Okay, so you feel that it might be continuing till the muscle gets fatigued, the peripheral system gets fatigued.
Muscles are getting fatigued.
Okay, right. Okay, that's the mechanical feature which might also be influencing the output of the central nervous system.
Then another thing we need to like check is that dystonic movements also. Can those also will be related to these kinds of CPGs? Like
okay, the dystonic movements.
They also will be like non-stop. That movements will be there till the patient is sleeping or like trying to voluntarily relax.
Okay, so is it because of the rhythmical networks which are coming in and again it's repeating, right?
Yeah.
No, okay. Yeah. No, might be like that. But one point I wanted to add was there seems to be the rhythm generation seems to be not only a function of the neural connections, it also seems to be a function of the electrochemical changes which are happening in the between the neurons. So there seems to be quite a literature on that. Of course, we are not going into that detail at the current point in time, but let's see how is this concept being challenged, which part of this concept is challenged, and what we have for it. Okay. Thank you all. Today was a primer to the Sunday's one. So we will again come back and start looking into what's the other direction of looking into this. Okay. Thank you all for joining. We will, I'll end the meeting now. Thank you so much for all the presenters. Because of the beautiful presentation, it was very clear. We have seen much details. Thank you.